Hello and welcome to Compensation Management. A primary objective in this class is for you to see how current events affect and are affected by compensation concepts and decisions. Over this summer, I've been gathering news stories that are directly related to what we cover in this class, and I'd really like to share just some of them with you to get you thinking about how important compensation management is to employers and to employees. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. First of all, right, for many HR professionals, especially those working at small businesses, the past few months have been like trudging through a hurricane with a leaky umbrella. But many have emerged as essential members of the executive team, working on the absolute top workplace questions of the day. Fast decisions with limited information have made this a really challenging time. Let's just think about some of the things that have been happening over the past 5 months, right? You've had layoffs and furloughs. Well, when it comes to compensation, do you pay these people or you don't? Do you need to ask them to use up their vacation time before any kind of payout? What's that going to do to your unemployment insurance? Many people obviously are now working from home, so you've got to evaluate your work from home policies. What are the quarantine rules and disinfection procedures? You've got to be able to read and translate all these emerging federal and state guidelines. You've got the Family First Coronavirus Response Act, the Paycheck Protection Program, the Family and Medical Leave Act, changes with the extended sick leave, safe to work policies. So many things that HR professionals in general and compensation professionals specifically have really been involved with over these past few months. But these folks also have to take into account not just what's happening in the immediate, right? But they've also got to recognize that whatever they do today is going to affect the organization in the future. So as employers begin this compensation planning for the rest of this year, as well as for 2021, 2022, they not only have to consider the pay levels, but also what type of an organization they're going to need to be to thrive in a post-pandemic marketplace. They're going to have to consider the future organization, right? This pandemic has caused employers to ask a lot of questions about operations. Where do people work? How do they get their work done? What is this organization even going to look like, right? How many employees do we actually need to get the work done in the future? So obviously, the answers to these questions are going to have significant impact on all aspects of pay. They're going to have to really think about their pay policies, the pay practices. Companies are reconsidering whether the traditional approach to paying people is still viable, right? So, for example, employers that want to increase the organization's resilience and flexibility may be considering more variable pay, more pay for performance or incentives, and those are variable, so they're easier to pull back in economic downturns. Employers also have to look beyond pay. So what is that employment relationship really going to look like? Employers may need to provide new types of benefits, especially programs that provide for more flexibility and security. So for example, employees may respond well to greater scheduling flexibility to manage childcare when this formal and reliable childcare may be really difficult to find in these times. So as some professionals in America's most expensive cities now are working remotely, and for a lot of these tech companies, they're working remotely for maybe years to come. So a lot of these folks are moving away from Seattle, San Francisco, New York. Maybe they're going to move to Tulsa, Oklahoma, or Oxford, Mississippi. And so when they do that, some of the companies may begin cutting the pay to match that local labor cost. So remote work may reshape the economy and even out regional wage disparities in this process, boosting pay for locals in cheaper cities. So Facebook is one of those companies that's already suggested that as its workers go remote, it would match their pay with the cost of living wherever they end up. So some companies are shifting this compensation program design to a completely national structure. So there's one single compensation structure, meaning if you are a compensation analyst, no matter where you are, this is how much we think you should be paid. But then they're going to identify geographic premiums for certain locations. Again, if you're going into Seattle, San Francisco, New York, these really expensive places to live. So while the jobless numbers remain staggeringly high, those still employed increasingly face potential pay cuts. The data suggests that about 4 million workers, particularly those in white-collar jobs, have had their pay cut during the pandemic. Whereas others are actually giving bonuses or have given bonuses. So Walmart paid a bonus of $300 for full-time hourly associates and $150 for their part-time workers. Drivers, managers, assistant managers, and its health and wellness workers reaping rewards as well. All told, Walmart spent approximately $428 million. McDonald's is another one. They awarded bonuses to every worker at its company-owned stores, equivalent to 10% of what workers earned in May. Kroger in March provided a one-time bonus to every hourly frontline grocery, supply chain, manufacturing, customer service associate, amounting to about $300 for full-time associates. So there are a number of these organizations at that front line level, right? So these people who need to be there for the rest of us. They've got to be on those front lines. But other companies are doing so as well. You have financial services firm Ally Financial gave employees making $100,000 or less a one-time $1,200 tax-free financial assistance. Facebook, JP Morgan also handed out financial payments to employees to help them. The Economic Policy Institute examines how much executives at the top 350 largest American firms make. And you can see from the first chart here that from 1978 to 2019, the average realized compensation swelled nearly 13-fold in inflation-adjusted terms, outpacing even the stock market. Another research firm published its analysis of realized chief executive pay between 2007 and 2016 at more than 400 big public American firms. And that is shown in the second graph here. This is a correlational analysis, and so you can see that at more than 3/5 of the firms, there was no correlation at all with 10-year total returns. So here you're saying that some firms are overpaying really lousy bosses, others are underpaying really successful ones. So do you think that these companies are really paying for performance? There's another study that shows strong evidence that bosses of energy firms see a clear pay gain when stock valuations rise as a result of oil price spikes, which they have no way to influence. Well, here we are in the midst of a pandemic, and people are, we're experiencing a really sharp economic crisis and record rise in unemployment. So a number of American companies have cut their executives' salaries in response to COVID-19. Companies like United Airlines, Delta Airlines, Marriott, Wyndham, even General Electric, and Disney's CEO reduced his base salary to $0 for this year. However, we'll see in Chapter 11, I think, that salary is really a very small portion of CEO compensation, so it may just kind of be window dressing right now. But before I get too cynical on you, understand that this analysis really is very incomplete because the year isn't over. And in the coming months, corporate boards could decide to significantly reduce the bonuses and the stock options they hand out to these top executives at the end of the year. So that really would represent a big break from recent years where the boards were giving larger bonuses and stock options at the end of the year. So here we are, right? Compensation for top CEOs in the United States were on average 264 times the median wage for the average worker in 2019. And because of all of the layoffs and furloughs that were brought on by the coronavirus, people expect that ratio to get even worse. All right, so now let's talk for a minute about non-exempt employees and what those are, your hourly employees. So when you're working at a physical location, it's really easy to have protocols in place. You can have time clocks, your manager can watch you work, make sure the work is getting done. You can really do a lot better job of tracking, even overtime hours, things like that. But as you guys know, the coronavirus, many people are working from home. And so employers' wage and hour policies and enforcement of those policies are also needing to account for this rise in telework. They got to amend their policies to address expectations regarding scheduling, timekeeping responsibilities, managing that overtime and labor costs, plus avoiding off-the-clock work, because it's really important for non-exempt. It is the law. You have got to pay people who are doing work. But the problem is when you're at home, sometimes it's really difficult to clearly delineate at home, personal life and work life. So that's really important to have those policies in place and that you enforce those policies, that if a non-exempt employee is doing work, you have to pay them for that work. You also may want to reimburse them for certain expenses of setting up an office at home. You've got to set expectations of, making sure that employee is responsive and available during normal work hours. How are you going to do performance management? What are those expectations? And, I'm talking about these policies and procedures, and some employers may actually choose not to develop true policies because things are changing so quickly right now. But it is always going to be really helpful for these employers to clarify that there are, in fact, unique policies in place because of COVID-19 that won't be in effect once, there's a vaccine, we're all back at work. So sometimes, like right now, right, you would permit employees to work from home, even if they aren't able to perform all the essential job functions. But as soon as it is reasonable and safe for everybody to come back, they should come back, and that will be go back to the old policies. All right, so this came out over the summer. It says that an affordable rent, which is defined as spending no more than 30% of your monthly income on housing, means that a worker needs to earn $23.96 per hour for a 2-bedroom rental and $19.56 per hour for a 1-bedroom rental, according to the National Low Income Housing Coalition's Out of Reach report. So currently, U.S. full-time minimum wage workers who earn $18.22 per hour cannot afford a 1-bedroom rental in 95% of U.S. counties. Schools, summer camps have closed. Right now, the elementary schools, some are open, some have closed, some have delayed starts. The child care is questionable. So it's, there's been just a lot of confusion among managers about what kind of leave they can approve and what kind of flexibility they're allowed. So HR really has needed to provide this strong guidance and communication to reduce that confusion and stress associated with trying to work and take care of small children. They're having to support both the managers and the employees with this communication. Performance reviews, and those are usually associated with merit increases. That's why we're talking about it in our compensation conversation here. But for many companies, there's not going to be an increase. Companies are in economic peril right now. So, some may even have a salary reduction like we talked about earlier. But some of these HR leaders are really trying to understand and reconsider their performance review strategies for this year in light of the stress caused by the pandemic and the recent social protests. So, for example, Google is suspending reviews for 6 months. Facebook, which is giving all employees a positive review and a bonus for performance for the first half of the year. So some are postponing reviews for now. Others are providing flexibility for teams and offices to decide what's best based on their situation. Some are increasing the frequency of check-ins and coaching, especially in this remote environment. That's really important. So managers just need to be more concerned with their employees and how they can best support the performance that's going to lead to success for the organizational mission. And as working from home stretches from, just a few months, we're going into the fall and beyond, many companies, are adopting some interesting, innovative incentives to maintain the engagement and productivity among their telecommuting employees. So they're kind of, expanding flexibility for personal time off and customized work schedules. They might have perks related to food and drink, camaraderie, dress code, maybe new technology is being introduced. Whereas on the other side, the executive perks of like gym memberships, company-wide events, those are being canceled. So HR just has to work with managers to decide, what kind of perks they should offer. And then there's going to come a point where you're also going to have to decide who must return to work, who gets to continue working from home, and those policies need to be pretty clearly delineated. Employers are also investing more of their benefit budgets in well-being programs and voluntary benefits offerings to help alleviate employees' financial and emotional stress. And honestly, they think they're going to continue to have to do this. Financial wellness programs include help with student loan debt, unexpected medical expenses, not surprising, right? Counseling services as part of employee assistance programs are more and more important because people really are feeling a great deal of stress. Some organizations are partnering with wellness companies to offer virtual fitness classes. And really some employees are seeking voluntary benefits such as hospital indemnity, critical illness, accident insurance, pet insurance, identity theft insurance, legal insurance. This heightened sense of mortality and vulnerability are really driving employees to seek more reassurances. And this is interesting. A number of businesses are facing this really unusual problem right now as a result of the pandemic, and that is that employees are not taking enough time off. HR professionals across the country are really struggling with how to persuade employees to take vacation when they're afraid to leave their homes. With much of this travel on hold, fewer employees have booked time off for vacations, and that's creating a problem for employers who are simultaneously worried about staff burnout, which we just talked about, right? The wellness benefits. But also, if things improve at the end of the year, there might be a mad rush and everybody wants to take off at the end of the year. They worry that workers' reluctance to take time off is only adding to all this anxiety and stress and mental health problems and all these things are being caused by the coronavirus and the recession. And then this unused paid time off is also an accounting liability. So some firms have been revamping their vacation policies in response. And HR leaders just have to model this behavior themselves. They need to consider taking their own vacation. They need to consider how they're going to perhaps change the policy a little bit in terms of carryover, that you should be able to take your vacation days from this year, carry them over to the next. But being honest with employees that delaying that time off could actually put the company in a really difficult financial position in the future. So there is a gender pay gap, and what I mean by that is just, you have your average rate of pay for men and the average rate of pay for women, and there's that gender pay gap. We'll talk more about that later, but in this pandemic, women are at a higher risk of seeing greater earnings penalty. The coronavirus has really forced a large portion of the population to work remotely. Then there are layoffs for many, but women have a higher risk of suffering a greater penalty because they make up the larger percentage of occupations in those industries that have been hit really hard. Community and social services, education, library and training, office and administration support, personal care. And women are also more likely to have to take time off or even quit in order to take care of the children who are no longer in school, as well as other family members who might be sick. So the pressure is on these employers and these business leaders to reassess their compensation systems to create an equitable environment for women within their companies and to keep society from taking major steps back in terms of equity and equality. They need to, organizations need to conduct gender pay equity analyses, correct for the inequities, and not let this pandemic make things worse. States that ban employers from asking job candidates about wage history. And again, what I mean here is whenever you're applying for a job, oftentimes they'll ask you, so how much do you make in your current job, or what was your salary in your last job? That has historically disadvantaged, again, women, people of color, who were already having that pay gap that we just talked about. So it perpetuates inequality. So companies should pay, as we'll talk about in this class, companies should pay based on the job, right? And how much that job means to the organization, and the qualifications of the individual should not be based on what the individual made in that last job. So nationally, the U.S. Supreme Court recently declined to review this Ninth Circuit's decision in a case called Rizzo versus Jovino, leaving a split among the circuit courts as to whether prior salary is a factor other than sex that can justify a pay disparity under the Federal Equal Pay Act. So there are some states, including Mississippi, that does ban asking about salary history. And then, as you can see, all the gray states on here, there are a lot of states who don't have a policy, and so employers in those states can ask that. All right, so this year, the Supreme Court did rule on a Title VII of the Civil Rights Act that covers sexual orientation and gender identity in protected groups. So employers need to review their benefits plans to help avoid lawsuits. For example, healthcare coverage. If, as an organization, you cover opposite sex spouses or partners, then now the Supreme Court ruling would suggest that you should also have that coverage for same-sex spouses or partners. Organizations are going to have to review their anti-harassment policies. They're going to have to review their training programs just to make sure that there isn't any discrimination for sexual orientation. So as this conversation around racial equality and diversity gains momentum in the corporate world, some business leaders say that tying their annual bonuses to these efforts may actually accelerate a company's hiring goals. So according to some recent data, only 78 of approximately 3,000 companies surveyed say that the portion of their CEO's pay was linked to accomplishing any kind of diversity objectives. However, some experts would suggest that tying those compensation and releasing very clear targets would hold company CEOs more accountable. Facebook, as an example, is factoring diversity and inclusion goals to performance reviews for some executives at the vice president level and higher. All right, more on the Supreme Court. They also ruled that religiously affiliated employers and universities may opt out of the Affordable Care Act's requirement to provide contraceptive care due to religious or moral objections. So the High Court remanded the matter with the expectation that further litigation would emerge. So they made this ruling, but they're expecting more litigation around that. More on the Affordable Care Act and the Supreme Court. So in November, or actually ahead of the November 2020 elections, the Trump administration, as well as the Republican states, want to convince the Supreme Court to find the entire Affordable Care Act unconstitutional, while Democrats are defending the act. The court is expected to issue a ruling next year, 2021, and while it is unlikely to fall, the decision does affect employers and the benefits that they offer. So here's the deal, right? This presentation talked about compensation decisions that have just happened over the past few months, and they affect and are affected by strategy, geographic and economic context, time rewards to performance, motivation, executive compensation, non-exempt employees covered under the Fair Labor Standards Act, minimum wage, changes in current laws, performance appraisals, perks and voluntary benefits, wage gaps, pay equity, diversity goals, federally mandated benefits under the Affordable Care Act. And we are going to cover all of these things in much more detail over the next 12 weeks. But I just wanted to show you guys how incredibly relevant compensation management is to each individual employee and to the organizations with which they work. When you finish this class, you're going to be a lot better equipped to advocate for yourself in your first job, and you can also help your organization achieve its mission. So I am looking forward to a great semester. Thank you.